the world can be a pretty bleak place. But Air Ride 2 was announced. So it's good again. With a 20-year gap since the last title, it's hard to realistically gauge the scope of Air Riders. It's clear the game had a fairly lengthy development cycle, and judging by the CGI trailer, a respectable budget as well. Also, I'm a greedy schmuck and just want my dream Kirby game to meet today's standards. So every hope and fear I name is going to be framed under the assumption that Air Riders is a much more ambitious project than its predecessor. First, I share some general thoughts that apply regardless of any mode, and then I will dive into specific wishes for Air Ride, Top Ride and City Trial, plus some personal wishes. You cannot discuss Air Riders without bringing up Sakurai's influence as a director. Ever since Smash, there has been a segment of the fanbase that argues he ignores modern Kirby, mainly everything since and after Return to Dreamland. While I don't intend to entertain such a discussion here, I am pretty neutral on the topic. It would be interesting to see how Sakurai approaches modern characters, but the first Air Ride was largely original too, with only a handful of references. Today it feels like the series cannot go one game without calling back every single title in the franchise, and it can quickly start to become forced. Star Allies as a celebration was fine, but not every entry needs to be like that. The Forgotten Land was so novel because it relied mostly on original ideas, establishing new standards that do not take credit from past accomplishments. Either way, it's a win-win situation for me, whether we receive the fan service that the enthusiast in me enjoys or completely fresh notions. What matters most in a true Air Ride successor isn't the amount of franchise representation, but how the gameplay evolves beyond the first installment. This means refined controls and fine-tuned mechanics. I'm not a developer, so I can only describe it vaguely, but everything should feel smoother, more responsive and less automated. Accessibility can only go so far before rendering the interactivity irrelevant. Especially for the racing aspect, it's crucial to deepen the gameplay just a bit more. Add tricks you can perform mid-air or other mechanics that lets players influence moment-to-moment situations. Put more emphasis on gliding to help Air Riders stand apart from other contemporary genre rivals. Include underwater sections to expand the possibilities for level design. It has been 20 years, Air Riders shouldn't feel like a sequel that could have launched back in 2010. The same goes for the variety of stars. All of them should return, along with a handful of new vehicles. Since the stars essentially are the characters in this game, I don't want them to play like a homogeneous unit influenced by the character's weight, like in many other fun races, and retain their unique quirks. Yes, that means balance will vary significantly, and yes, some stars will be practically useless on certain tracks, but that's a part of the game's essence. In City Trial, for example, their distinct playstyles aren't really a problem. You pick up what you find, and you have to adjust. It forces players to try vehicles they would otherwise never touch and maybe discover unexpected benefits. Plus, achievements or challenges could be designed in more creative ways, since each star demands different skills to master. Ideally, every machine from the original Air Ride would return, along with a few new ones inspired by iconic Kirby elements, such as a Robobot vehicle, the Lore Star Cutter, or truck. Of course, the more stars they include, the harder it becomes to give each one a distinct feeling, so as an alternative, they could keep the number to a manageable size, but give each one a few skins. Maybe even include scrapped ideas as color swaps. It's a simple and effective way to reference beloved parts of the series without overcomplicating the core gameplay. I'm understanding the one-button control scheme the series likes to use, and I'm not suggesting other control methods, but I trust Sakurai to evolve the foundation without sacrificing Kirby's simplistic nature. New playable characters are probably the hottest topic when it comes to Air Riders. Will there be multiple drivers or just differently colored Kirbys again? Air Ride was designed that way because copy abilities essentially served as the game's item system during races. So while the stars affect your movement and handling, the ability to attack or defend during a race was kept consistent through Kirby's powers. Regular characters can't inhale enemies, which theoretically puts them at a disadvantage, if Kirby is the only one who can use copy abilities. DDD and Meta Knight were included as mandatory bonuses, but they came with fixed playstyles and could only perform a frontal strike, limiting their versatility. Ultimately, Air Rider's approach to playable characters will depend on how it decides to handle copy abilities, or what substitutes it offers in their place. The trailer seemed to suggest Kirby's again, but that could just be a nostalgic callback for Air Ride fans rather than a confirmation. The ideal way to satisfy nerds without overcomplicating Air Ride's gameplay would be to split the character roster depending on the mode you're playing. The original already used a similar approach. DDD DD and Meta Knight were playable in Air Ride but only appeared in the free roam mode of City Trial. In City Trial, it's crucial that every player starts on equal footing, with the same chances and opportunities. Introducing characters with unique default abilities would tip the balance, giving unfair advantages to drivers with the best default skill and dulling the mode's appeal. A character split is the best of both worlds. It preserves City Trial's naturally chaotic fairness while giving the Air Ride mode a more defined identity. In a way, it makes Air Ride feel more inviting and deliberate compared to City Trial's unfairly natural entertaining gameplay premise. As for potential characters, I don't have any strong particular wishes. Include most of the modern cast and the roster should feel pretty satisfying. A couple of meme picks wouldn't hurt either, but ultimately it's more about how the characters are portrayed than who makes it in. Seeing how Sakurai interprets modern Kirby figures is almost more exciting than actually playing them. Watch them find a way to sneak a Fire Emblem character in before Bandana D. Even though all eyes are naturally on City Trial, I'm confident the actual racing portion will also receive a substantial share of development attention. Air Ride is arguably the original game's most flawed mode. Not only because it executes the fundraiser formula somewhat superficially, but also due to the lack of depth needed for long-term replayability. I'm actually one of the few people who genuinely enjoys Air Ride and recognizes what sets it apart from similar games. The aggressive playstyle, the ability to knock out opponents mid-race, the emphasis on gliding, and the chaotic, semi-automated sequences all give Air Ride an identity of its own, a rare thing in a genre often overshadowed by Mario Kart. Usually every fundraiser gets immediately benchmarked against Mario Kart standard, but with Air Ride that comparison doesn't really fit. It's so different that beyond basic genre similarities it stands completely on its own, and that ultimately plays to its advantage. The automation in Air Ride is often criticized as a major flaw, mainly because of the game's incredibly basic controls. Riding on raids may limit interactivity, but it was primarily used to enhance the race's chaotic tone, increase the pace, connect independent sections, and give players a brief moment to catch their breath. There's nothing wrong with that as long as it doesn't overshadow the player's control, and I really hope they keep the rails in Air Riders. What they should focus on improving, however, is the gliding. It always felt great to perform and perfectly fits the light, floaty feeling that defines the Kirby series. With more robust controls, Air Riders could finally become the accessible, chaotic fun racer that Air Ride never fully managed to be, and I can only hope the developers recognize the potential they have in their hands this time. What I'm slightly worried about are the tracks. Despite the low number, each of them was tightly designed, with a few secrets and gimmicks to explore. Theoretically, no one plays a fun racer to explore, yet everyone appreciates Mario Kart 64's Peach Castle or Double Dash's optional branches with no real purpose. Ironically, Mario Kart World strikes this nerve as its unique selling point, and I hope Air Riders doesn't fail to see the appeal of exploration. Destroying the surroundings, turning the lights on, these gimmicks may not give you a significant edge over the other players, but they improve the overall consistency, charm and interactivity of the track throughout the race. In Air Ride, health and the ability to be taken out mid-race were not default settings and had to be turned on in the options, but it should have been the other way around. Without health, attacking your opponents has no noteworthy impact on the race, almost negating the whole purpose of copy abilities altogether. It may marginally decrease your opponent's speed for a moment, but it's so negligible that it's not worth the detour. With actual health, the races get a lot spicier, and by adding a few healing items, no one will be eliminated immediately. The reason I mention a feature that already existed in Air Ride is because the races were not built with health in mind. If you're unlucky, you can be taken out without even completing the first lap, with no option to recover or find any healing items. It was just an option and potentially too stressful for beginners, but designing courses with health in mind while still allowing players to turn it off makes much more sense than the other way around. Both playstyles stay intact and experienced players get a more balanced sense of tension in their races. Although Air Ride puts Top Ride on the same pedestal as the other two modes, the game knows just as well as every fan that it's nowhere near as comparable. The gameplay is simplistic, the perspective limited, and the replay value constrained by achievements. To be honest, it wouldn't surprise me at all if this mode gets ditched or becomes more of a one-time minigame with no achievements, similar to most side modes and other mainline titles. Still, I enjoy it for what it is, and especially with achievements, there's a lot of fun to be found in Top Ride. While there aren't many vehicles or characters to choose from, it's the compact tracks, maps, with all their little secrets that prove the creator's attention to detail. A surprisingly robust selection of items complement the overall package, and it could easily serve as a charming side endeavor in Air Riders. Because I don't want them to put too many resources into a potential follow-up to Top Right, there are a couple of straightforward solutions to raise its appeal. Top Right is the perfect place to add a variety of playable characters besides Kirby, since it offers character-independent items and machines. To underline the ordinary gameplay, maybe include only regular enemies as playable drivers, and let Dream Friends shine in one of the main modes. A toy-like plastic look could punctuate the overall easygoing nature of the mode and make it feel like a small toy box game, similar to Tilt and Roll in Kirby and the Forgotten Land. My imagination could be just as limited as Top Right's premise itself when it comes to contemporary ideas, but for charming small modes like this, the potential lies in the details. I hope it returns in some shape or form in Air Riders, no matter how small or big it gets. Now for the main attraction and everyone's biggest hope, City Trial, the mode responsible for Air Ride's everlasting reputation and most likely the reason a successor was developed in the first place. The premise of City Trial is such an entertaining concept that it's still enjoyable to this day, even with CPUs, and was recycled in Smash for 3DS for a reason. This is where Air Rider's main budget should go, and there are a couple of hopes I want them to see realize. First, either increase the scope of the map or include at least 2 additional ones. Despite its manageable size, City Trial's landscape is full of secrets, hiding spots and memorable Easter eggs to discover. Most of these locations don't even serve a practical purpose, are completely optional and sometimes can only be reached on foot. I appreciate such secondary secrets that exist for no reason beyond putting smiles on curious children. Reaching the top of City Trial's map to feel like the king of the world is a reward in itself, and I hope Air Riders recognizes the appeal of discoveries fueled by childlike curiosity. Increasing the scope of the map and possibly the player count per match isn't out of the question, considering Smash's gigantic stages in 8-player mode. Sakurai often likes to utilize a feature in one game and bring it over to another, which is why we could see a huge sandbox filled with multiple players. Another solution would be to offer 3 maps, each featuring a completely different setting. One could be based on a classic Kirby location such as DDD's Castle or the Great Cave Offensive, while another could reference a more modern set piece such as the Forgotten Land. To round things off with nostalgia, the map of City Trial could be fully remade with visually pleasing graphics while keeping the original structure intact. Both approaches could work depending on execution, but I assume that offering 3 maps based on different eras of Kirby would please longtime players as well as newcomers more. It would also provide appropriate variety within the limitations of a budget, and remain doable for tightly constructed, compact level design. Events should still strike a balance between subtle effects that don't necessarily influence every player's situation and grandiose entrances like a gigantic Dynablade. If there are going to be multiple maps, it could be challenging to design events appropriate for each sandbox, but most of City Trial's events are fairly adaptable and work in any setting. In addition to the existing ones, they could introduce more game-specific occurrences, such as the sudden Hulkman invasion, portals opening up and switching everyone's position, or jumper heart pieces falling from the sky and disrupting a player's control if touched. The options for events are endless, and while I think the original already did a competent job offering a fitting range, I hope for some bombshell moments that no one expects. As a side note, this would also finally be the perfect opportunity to bring Dynablade back after so many years, and I'm certain Sakurai won't miss the chance to represent his favorite game. As for everything else and the minor details, I'm completely open to anything new. I'm not a competitive player, so I have no specific wishes for concrete gameplay tweaks, and all of the minigames at the end of City Trial round work perfectly fine. There should be a free roam mode to explore the sandbox at your own pace, and as with every other mode, an achievement board would enhance the replay value. City Trial caught lightning in a bottle, and the core gameplay premise is so entertaining that I can't imagine a way to mess it up. This feature will make or break Air Riders. Previous Kirby multiplayer games included online functionality so poorly that it did nothing to help the title's longevity. There's surely some niche communities still enjoying Fighters 2 or the occasional Dream Buffet session, but both entries had such bare-bones online implementation that they fail to remain relevant. Air Riders must include a relatively capable online mode, at least for City Trial, without severe lag, with the option to play with friends or randoms, and ideally a spectator mode. Normally I wouldn't get my hopes up, but since this is a game 3 years in development, created by Sakurai and so far marketed as a big deal, it should offer an enjoyable online experience for some casual matches. Music plays an integral role in Air Ride, and it's so important that I had to highlight it as a standalone chapter. This might be my most subjective point in this wishlist video, but Air Ride has by far the best soundtrack in the entire series. Yes, some of the most thrilling tracks are directly borrowed from the animated show, but every new piece of music holds up just as well. City Tride's melody alone evokes feelings strong enough to cure depression. Of course, I want the soundtrack on the same level, but although this may arguably be my most important personal wish, I'm going to keep my expectations low. By no means do I want to imply that Air Rider's OST will fall below the outstanding standard of the series, but Air Ride's selection of composers was uniquely unparalleled for the franchise. We had fan favorites such as Ishikawa, but also more infrequent talents like Shogo Sakai, the man behind Mother 3 or Mass Attack. And while not specifically composed for a game, Akira Miyagawa's phenomenal work on the animated show was partially carried over. Some of these composers will probably return for new arrangements, but Miyagawa is not typically a game composer, so I logically can't expect any new tracks from him. The same goes for Ishikawa and Ando. Apparently Air Riders is being developed by Sakurai and Bandai Namco, so technically there's no guarantee that both Kirby composers will be involved in creating a fully original score. Possibly a handful of pieces, but not necessarily in full charge. Thanks to Smash, Sakurai and Nintendo must have excellent connections with all sorts of gifted musicians. So whoever's responsible for Air Rider's soundtrack, I hope it will at least scratch the high bar set by Air Ride's fast-paced, action-packed orchestration. Before I go any further in what was supposed to be a quick 10-minute wishlist video, these are the essential features I'm hoping to see. I haven't really talked about the subtle yet powerful sound design, possible boss fights or story mode for a good reason. I was never more excited for a Kirby title in my life as a fan, and many of my hopes are based on the assumption that it will feature a similar structure with 3 modes like the original. Naturally, it could turn out to be something completely different from the first entry, so whatever direction they choose to focus on, I will keep an open mind. At least that's what every YouTube video game person likes to say. In reality, I'm going to play Air Riders with a heavy bias towards the original and release people's favorite kind of video, a multi-hour long review complaining about every frame that isn't like Air Ride, while blaming the game for my own skill issue.
Box is glitching.